Call queues, or inbound queues, are found underneath call control queues. A queue is essentially a virtual line. As callers get added to the queue, they're all put behind each other one by one. So sometimes if you call into a company's technical support line, it'll say you are number 4 in the queue. This is what that is. And as people's calls get answered, you move up into the queue until you eventually reach a receptionist. So let's go ahead and add a queue. Now, queues can get complicated pretty quickly. Your basic queue just simply has static extensions in it. So first off, let's define an extension number for our queue. And let's call it support. Actually, let's call it technical support. Now, an agent is a member of a queue that is capable of receiving phone calls. In this case, there are two groups of agents. There are static agents and dynamic agents. A static agent, and of course you've got this little hint to tell you as well, a static agent is an extension that is permanently a member of the queue. They are assumed to be at their phone and ready to receive phone calls. They don't have to log in and log out. So let's say Luke and Jared are both static agents, so their phones can always receive calls. However, let's say that Sally, Tom, and John are all dynamic, which means let's say that they're part-time employees and they have to clock in and clock out of the queue. This is done by each person typing in a code to their phone or pushing a BLF button, but we'll talk about that later. The failover destination, now this will rarely ever get used. What this is if there's some systemic problem, like the queue has way too many people in it, or something happens to the phone call, you can route the customer to somewhere else, like a ring group if you want to. You can pretty much ignore this. It won't actually do anything unless something big happens. Or actually, if you don't have any static agents and everyone is logged out of the queue, there are no agents available that will also fail over to this destination. So if Luke and Jared's phones are disconnected and Sally, Tom, and John are all clocked out, there is nowhere to send the phone call, so it'll fail over to this. Let's go to the Advanced tab. Once again, we do have a caller ID prefix option. In this case, we can set it to support, which means that a phone call coming in will have the caller ID support added before the person's name. And this tells your agents that it's a support call versus a sales call or something else. Skip busy agents. This enables you to not include agents that are already on the phone. IP phones have call waiting, which means they can take multiple phone calls at the same time. This switch will prevent your agents from being able to answer more than one call at any given time. You can also record phone calls in this queue. Call recordings, you can also record all the phone calls in this queue. Now, wrap-up time. When an agent answers a phone call, there is some time for the agent to be able to enter in notes or submit a support ticket for that caller. That's what the wrap-up time gives them. So if you set a 30-second wrap-up time, that means that the agent has 30 seconds of silence to where they will not receive any phone calls for 30 seconds so they can update their support tickets and get ready for the next caller. The ring strategy, typically you won't want to mess with this too much. However, there are a few strategies we can use. Ring all means it'll ring all the agents that are available, which means static agents plus the clocked in dynamic agents. The least recent, which is it'll call the agent that has least recently received a phone call. So if there's a user that hasn't received one in over an hour and everyone else is receiving calls, it'll call them first. Then there's the option with the fewest calls. So it'll give the call over to an agent that has not yet gotten as many calls as the other agents. These will essentially be the same thing, but sometimes they can be different. And then of course there's random, which will just send the call to random agents in the group. Statistically speaking, it's actually an even spread. So over the course of 24 hours, all agents will receive the same number of phone calls, typically. And of course, we've got music on hold, so while people are in the technical support queue, they can listen to rock music or whatever other, hold albums you've got. We'll go ahead and submit that queue. Now, let's add some other features to the concept of queues. So we now have this queue called Technical Support at Extension 9600. If we head over to Extensions and Provisioning, we can actually add the queue. Let's say that Jared Hull at 144 is going to be a dynamic agent, part of this queue. So we're going to set one of his BLF keys to busy lamp field, and then you'll see queue login for each of the dynamic agents. Now, Jared is not part of this list, so let's just say he's Sally Sample. This will create a button in location 1 on Jared's particular phone, enabling him to log in and log out of the technical support queue. In this case, is Sally Sample. The button will turn red when they're logged in and green when they're logged out. We'll head back to call control and queues. And as always, make sure to hit apply changes to save your settings.